The artist and activist behind one of the most iconic images from Barack Obama's election campaign and an early supporter of then-Senator Obama, now says the president has not lived up to the promise that he and so many others had in 2008 and 2012. Shepard Fairey is my guest on this edition of Politicking. Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King. His art extremely influential and at times controversial. His fans number in the millions. He's Shepard Fairey, and he is probably best known for his iconic Hope poster featuring the likeness of President Barack Obama, which came to represent his 2008 presidential campaign. He's been quoted as saying, however, that President Obama has not lived up to the promise of his campaigns, and he's involved in this presidential election as well, this time with a new voting initiative. It's a pleasure to welcome him here on set. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Larry.
What is your initiative?
Well, it's called Make America Smart Again.
And you're wearing that pin, and I have a little pin here again. So Trump wants to make America great again. You want to make us smart again, presuming that we were once smart.
That's right. Well, I think that's always a work in progress. And you know, how one would define making America great again is really about understanding the dynamics of our political situation and also participating in democracy. We have this system that, you know, everyone can be involved in, yet, you know, not nearly enough people participate. So encouraging people to educate themselves about the issues and, you know, and then vote, get out.
How do you sign up? Well,
there's govotemaasa.com, Maasa being Make America Smart Again, and then you can also text Maasa to RT Vote, which is Rock the Vote, and sign up. And you know, we're going to be creating all sorts of you know, different forms of dialogue and access to facts. You know, I'm a big fan of things like PolitiFact that allow you to know where the candidates' statements lie in a truth-o-meter. And, you know, but obviously Make America Smart Again is about a lot of things. I think just the incentivizing people to think about how they understand the dynamics of everything that affect them, and then they can make the most informed decisions. And, you know, I think that, you know, by going through that process of looking at different things. For me, there are a lot of issues I care about that I think have a cascading effect, like campaign finance, how that affects our political discourse, the voter ID. There's all sorts of different things that I think a lot of people just aren't quite aware of. And when you look at the results of the Brexit and the immediate Google searches of what is the EU, I think it's clear that you know, Americans aren't alone in needing to be more aware of things that might greatly impact their lives.
H.L. Mencken once said no one went broke going against the intelligence of the American people. We have not always voted well, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes, that's true.
As a collective group, whenever they question people, they can't name their own congressman.
Yeah, and you know, I work on a lot of different things that are really about civic engagement. You know, as an artist, it's not always easy to make some of these things you know, sexy and appealing. But I enjoy that challenge, and I think that you know, most of the time when people are social, we look at the role that social media has taken on, and people obviously want to connect with each other, but they could be connecting with each other in ways that you know, meaningfully not only benefit them in their social status, but also how they relate with their community, and that community could be a community of people that have the same interests, or just community in general. But I think that in a lot of ways our social nature is being squandered on the less empowering side of things.
Where did Obama disappoint you?
Obama was a really great communicator.
He made that great poster.
Thank you.
Helped elect it.
You know, I made the poster hopefully as a as a way to encourage people to look at Obama's ideas, which he expressed so eloquently as a campaigner. A lot of his progressive ideas about sustainable energy, the need to acknowledging climate change, decrease the power of lobbyists in Washington, improve access to health care. Those are all ideas. Get out of Iraq, wind down in Afghanistan. These were ideas that really appealed to me. The moment he took office, he was met with a lot of obstructionism, and I think that he did not communicate as forcefully, in the face of opposition as he had as a campaigner. Now, I understand that he doesn't wave a magic wand as president. Congress needs to be somewhat involved in getting things done. But what I was disappointed is that he failed to use what I think is his greatest skill, that he's a very compelling communicator as profoundly as he had as a campaigner.
So you supported Sanders, right?
I did support Sanders.
More with Shepard after the break. If Clinton is the nominee, will you support her?
Yes, I will. I think that Sanders has driven the conversation in the right direction, and I've seen changes in the things that Hillary talks about and the things that she's passionate about. I think she's a very shrewd politician. She recognizes that, that's the way the wind is blowing with a certain group of a number of the, progressive or Democratic side of things. And so I think that, of course, Hillary would be, she's very qualified. She would be superior to Donald Trump. But what I think is the most important takeaway from the success of Bernie's campaign, relatively speaking, is that he did it without corporate money or super PACs. And most politicians say they cannot have a viable campaign without those big donors and corporate donations. And Bernie was able to run a thriving campaign with smaller donations.
But millennials make up the largest voting bloc in the United States. Historically, though, their turnout level is low.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I'm passionate about Make America Smart Again and Rock the Vote, because when you look at the percentages, millennials are the most diverse and largest voting bloc now, yet their turnout is 10 to 15% lower in it.
Why?
I think because they feel disenfranchised. I think that when you've grown up feeling that the system is not working, a lot of people feel, what's the point in participating if it's not going to work anyway? Of course, my answer to that is you ensure that it doesn't work if you don't participate. I think that the political landscape would look a lot different if there was a 90% turnout within that voting bloc.
You ever regret doing that poster?
No, I don't regret doing that poster, because for me, as someone outside of the political establishment, with limited resources, relatively speaking, I did something that I think affected a lot of people and showed that beyond just voting, that there are things that anyone can do with their talents to participate in the conversation politically, and that it was a grassroots initiative that I funded on my own. Hundreds of thousands of posters and stickers, and I did free downloads, and it ended up becoming incredibly pervasive. I did that thinking that maybe I would affect my own small audience for my art, but hoping, in the way I designed it, that it would go further, and it did. But one thing that I do regret is that some people looked at the hope of the poster and the hope of Obama's campaign with the poster as a symbol of that as a one-time thing. Okay, I voted for Obama, problem solved, things are going to be better. The poster is an entry point to a much more sophisticated conversation about how we all push things forward. So, if it's seen as as just a one-dimensional piece of propaganda, that's not how it was intended.
But Obama's approval rating has gone up now, I think, to 55, right?
Yeah, it has.
Well, much higher than Clinton or Trump.
And I think.
In other words, he'd be reelected if there was
and this can be attributed to a lot of things. And I'm not a psychologist, but I think when you look at a lot of the acrimony that's been happening with the lead up to the election in the primary process. Obama's ability to be dignified and eloquent and not fly off the handle, I think actually seems really appealing in contrast.
To what's going on. You spend time in Paris creating murals, taking part in an Earth Crisis exhibition. Climate change, why is it so contentious? 98% of scientists tell you what it is. Why is it even an issue? It's obvious.
Well, it should be. It should be, and I think a lot of it has to do with media responsibility. I mean, media responds to ratings, and I think that terrorism and wedge issues like guns and marriage equality, they get better ratings. And but when I look at the long-term problems for humanity and every other species, climate change is the biggest problem that we face. And if we think terrorism is a problem now, wait until sea levels are rising and populations are displaced and there's a different level of chaos going on. We're going to see unrest and terrorism in much greater proportions.
The problem is because we don't see it in front of us. All right, the temperature's up a little, but no one's panicking. It's like someone say the national debt. People don't care because the debt doesn't call you on the phone and say, "Give me $14 tomorrow."
Right, exactly. And and if your inclination is to deny it, when James Inhofe walks into Congress with a snowball, then there's proof right there. It's March and it snowed, so there's no climate change. But I think that the thing that I try to talk about, I have children, you have children. Anyone who has children and thinks about the responsibility of leaving the planet in as good a shape or better for the next generation. We always talk about opportunities for our children. Opportunities are going to be greatly diminished due to the consequences of climate change.
We'll be right back with more of Shepard Fairey right after this. Welcome back to Politicking. I'm talking with Shepard Fairey, the contemporary street artist and illustrator. He created the iconic Barack Obama Hope poster. And, of course, they're very involved in this movement called Make America Smart Again. Some social media questions. Kristen Pickett on Twitter says, when you create your art, do you start with the sociological idea you want to inspire and then make the art based on the idea, or do you make the art and then decide the concept? What comes first?
One of the things that I've come to understand is that no matter how important the concept behind a piece of art is, if the picture isn't compelling, no one cares. So frequently I start with a concept, but then finding the solution that's a compelling picture, and sometimes it's provocative, sometimes it's beautiful, sometimes it's got decorative appeal, but behind that there's a message. And I'm inspired by a lot by things I read, by music, by lyrics, lectures. I mean, speakers like from Noam Chomsky to Orwell. I'm very inspired by things that I read, but then finding a way to articulate that as an image. And the great thing about art, I think, is that in the process of doing it, it's very enjoyable. It's a form of, in some ways, escapism. But then embedded in that is something that I think engages with people and hopefully makes people think.
In the history of art, when they look back at the great Goya and all the great artists of the past, were any of them activists?
Yeah, I mean, there have been.
Is there a famous active artist from the 16th century?
Well, in the 16th century, I think a lot of people were doing things to celebrate religion and doing things for the church. I'm much more interested in art from the 20th century on, because I relate to art in the era of mass media. My art is very much about using a language that's as universal as possible, because I'm a product of the age of print and television and now the internet.
Fritzio on Twitter. You started by placing your Andre the Giant stickers around your campus to inspire thought about the surroundings from classmates. You've also been called a graffiti artist. How do you justify the defamation of property that isn't yours in order to promote a political idea?
Well, first of all, yes, I've worked a lot on the street, and I've gotten in some trouble for that. But you know, I am not, I'm not anonymous. I am who I am, and I want to be accountable for the things I do. I choose the locations where I place my art as places I can stand behind, derelict buildings, the backs of street signs that are not in any way impeding the communication of the sign.
Why do you do that?
I do that because
you sell paintings, right?
I do sell paintings, but that doesn't reach a large enough audience. The art world is a very, very narrow and an elite place. It's to me, the public has a right to art. They have a right to more than advertising in public space, and the desire to use as many platforms as possible to democratize art is, that's where I'm coming from. That's the desire I'm fulfilling. There always are going to be people that say, that's not the right way to do this or that. That's in every area of life, and I have my chosen area, and I'm always willing to defend the things I do.
Salute you for it. Paula Walla wants to know if you still post any of your work in public these days.
I do. I just came back from Paris, where I painted three large murals. I'm looking for as many different ways to share my art in public as possible. And it's even though I used to really have no other choice than to do artwork in public without permission, I employ what I call the inside-outside strategy. I still have the mentality of working outside the system when I need to, but infiltrating the system and doing things to share my ideas, maintaining my integrity is an important thing. I've worked with people who have given me the sides of buildings that they could just as well give to an advertiser and make a lot of money from, but they're cool enough to see some merit in what I'm doing and offer me a place. And there are people from the street art community that say, well, that's not keeping it real because you were given permission. But for me, it's always about democratizing, not about saying that you have to do something without permission for it to be legitimate. The willingness to go against the grain is something that I still have, but it's not always the most constructive route to sharing my work with people and my ideas.
It's also great that you could still sell your art despite someone might be saying, well, why should I buy it if you're on the streets free?
Exactly, and I have a huge range of prices for my work, from a 5-cent sticker to a T-shirt, a $40 poster, up to very expensive paintings. But I want my work to be accessible to a high school student or a college student, and the art world doesn't operate that way. They like to restrict the supply to increase the demand and have artists make trophies, but that's not the audience I really want to pander to.
Julia Wake on Twitter, has Hillary Clinton reached out to you about her campaign?
Hillary has not reached out to me about her campaign, and after I did some work for Bernie, I doubt she will. In a lot of ways, I like to do things to support the people that I believe in, but in some ways, I'm looking to encourage people. I didn't do a portrait of Bernie Sanders because I wanted people to not look at things quite as superficially. I used an image of an angel holding a flame that's more symbolic of the idea of how we create our own future and move things forward. But it's a tough spot to be in because art and images can be very superficial. You look at the nature of advertising, and it's an uneasy persuasion. I want to indulge in the language that people speak, but I also don't want to do it in a way that contributes to a furthering of just the dumbing down of this kind of media.
Does Donald Trump worry you?
Donald Trump worries me a lot. I think that he's completely out of touch. He's been rich his whole life. He's completely out of touch with the struggles of the average person. He's driven by ego. He has no experience. All of this is worrisome. When I look at what motivates people to follow Trump, I think it's fear and anger, and he's pandering to that in a way that I think is easy. Unfortunately, it seems to be working to a degree, but you know, everything I'm doing is trying to encourage people to look at, you know, at how they fit into humanity, not to just think selfishly.
Thank you, Shepard. Information on Shepard's Make America Smart Again initiative, check govotemasa.com. Thank you so much, Shepard.
Oh, thank you.
Great to see you.
I really appreciate you having me on.
You know Bryan Cranston from his award-winning work on Breaking Bad and Oscar-nominated role in Trumbo, his incredible portrayal of Lyndon Johnson in All the Way, among so many other roles. In his new film, The Infiltrator, Cranston plays a federal agent who goes deep undercover inside a Colombian drug trafficking network. I recently spoke with Bryan about his new film career, and we got into some political talk as well. He is squarely in the camp of Hillary Clinton and is not shy about his criticisms of Donald Trump. Here's a little bit of that conversation. You recently tweeted, with such cowardice, GOP House members exhibited being the puppets of the NRA after Orlando, right? What do you make of all that?
Sad. I just don't understand why an average citizen is allowed to have a military-grade weapon that can cause massive destruction. You know, how much is enough? What's the number when people say, okay, that's enough, we've reached our quota of unnecessary killings, so now we should have some sensible gun restrictions?
You think the Second Amendment was poorly written?
No, it wasn't poorly written.
Well, it says in order to form a militia.
Right, but that was when there was no army.
I know, so that...
Right. So our forefathers were brilliant in drafting that, and also saying, you know what, in Thomas Jefferson's words, paraphrasing, but said, in the future there will be different needs that we cannot conceive right now. So we need to construct a policy of amendments that allow the changes of the Constitution.
The Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. That's what was created. Well, now we are faced with that we don't need everybody to have, and could they conceive of a machine gun when they're dealing with muskets? No. And so our forefathers were telling us, go ahead, make the appropriate changes to suit what the society you live in needs.
But they made it so hard to amend.
No, what has happened is that the NRA is just an immensely powerful organization, and gun owners are protecting every sentence and every intention, and they're reading into it what they choose to.
They're financed by the manufacturers, though.
Yeah, and they're very aggressively defending it. Now, I personally love to shoot a gun. It's fun. It's skillful. I have no problem with people wanting to protect their family. I have no problem with any of that. It's just that, so you don't think that someone who is on a watch list should be restricted from buying a gun until we clear that person? You don't think that a person who has spent time in psychiatric wards should be prevented from? You think that anybody walking into a gun show should be able to walk out with a gun without doing a background check? We give 16-year-olds driving lessons, and they have to pass a driving lesson. Shouldn't everyone who has a gun legally be required to pass a test to show that they can actually use that?
It's almost insane.
It's insane.
You said recently that Trump is devoid of substance, and I will do everything in my power to make sure he's not the president.
I think he is like a huge cargo ship. Massive, commands attention, demands it. His wake leaves tremendous, problems. His displacement of water is enormous, and yet you go into the cargo hold and you go, hello, hello, it's empty. There's nothing there. This is a man who desperately wants to win that position. He wants the title. He wants the title of president, but he doesn't want the job of president. Even his own campaign manager, Paul Manafort, said in an interview, well, his likely vice presidential candidate will have an extensive legislative background to do the things that Donald Trump doesn't want to do and push policy and make bills down to Congress. And I'm thinking, wait, to do what he doesn't want to do? To put forth his agenda to create laws with a cooperative, it's like he doesn't want it. No, I don't want to do it. He just wants the job. I'm going off. You're getting me going here,
You're
Larry.
going to stump for Hillary.
Absolutely.
The Infiltrator opens July 13th, and check out my Twitter feed for more information on when my full interview with its star, Bryan Cranston, airs. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Politicking. Remember, you can join the conversation on my Facebook page. Check out the Politicking blog on our homepage or tweet me at Kingsthings. And don't forget, use the Politicking hashtag. And that's all for this edition of Politicking.